And we are live. Hello, everyone. It's Mxiety, your mental health talk show host, Twitch partner, and just all around person. Happy to be here and talk to you and learn more about all things about how our brain works. We have the honor, I already geeked out a little bit before on the stream, so I am not going to totally re-geek out so we don't embarrass ourselves, chat. But Dr. Keyne C has been a long-time dream guest of mine ever since I saw her non-emergency phone number listing, so that you don't call if somebody is experiencing a mental health emergency, that you don't call 911. And here's the listing for certain states. It is on her Twitter, so be sure to check that out. But also, okay, so now I'm going to do an official introduction. I realize Dr. Law has not spoken yet, so just bear with me. We got to make this super fancy, okay, guys? All right, so Dr. Law completed her doctoral education at the University of Southern Mississippi and her predoctoral clinical internship at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston. Her research primarily focuses on examining the dynamic changes and interplay between ecological, cognitive, emotional, behavioral, and biological systems that facilitate the development of suicidal thoughts and the progression into lethal suicidal behavior. Dr. Law's existing body of research integrates a diverse range of measurements such as self-report questionnaires, semi-structured interviews. She's also passionate towards innovation and interdisciplinary collaboration to enhance research in the field of clinical psychology. Outside of that, she likes hiking, yoga, has aerial skills, and recycled art projects. Welcome, Dr. Law.
Thanks for having me.
So excited to have you. Do you have anything that's a really impressive list, but do you have anything to add to that? Anything I missed? Anything that's also really cool that you're working on that you can tell us about?
No, I'm trying to think. I've been all around. I feel like it's been fun kind of moving around the United States. I'm actually Canadian, so I started out in Vancouver, British Columbia, and kind of moved down to Mississippi, and now I'm back in Seattle. So it's been a fun little, jump around the United States for me. Cool things, I don't know.
You're really cool, so you don't have to like one up yourself. It's all good. Like, I already think you're freaking cool, like celebrity status cool. So, but like, if there's anything else where I don't want to put you on the spot to be like, tell me you're cooler than you already are.
Well, I think, what's really cool are my graduate students. I love them all. They're so cool, and like they have such really great ideas, and I just love kind of watching their ideas grow, as well as the things that they bring to my research. So I really do want to give them a shout out and like acknowledge just like what a wonderful team that I have, because I really can't do the work that I do today without my team. And then obviously, having really awesome mentors have helped me along the way as well. So I think that's about all I wanted to add, is that, the research is kind of a big network, and it's a really big field, and so the connections within that field is just so important to me, and so I just wanted to highlight my little network as well.
Love it. Listen, it doesn't happen as often as it should, where people who come on are like, hey, I wouldn't be here without XYZ, and I really appreciate when people acknowledge that. So that's absolutely lovely. So I want to, this is a very tough topic, like undoubtedly. So I am going to try to ease us into it with the understanding that there's really no easing into it. But yeah, so what made you interested in researching suicidal ideation?
Yeah, so this is a fun story. Well, it's a weird way to say it's a fun story. But,
that's how I'm like, I love talking about mental health. I'm like, well, that's weird, but we get it. Yeah.
It's kind of a weird, dark place to come from. But so the fun story is that I'm actually a really huge nerd, and I knew I wanted to be a psychologist since I was in 5th grade.
Whoa.
Like 7th grade. Yeah, wrote a pamphlet on like how to become a clinical psychologist. It was like my 7th grade like library project. And so I always knew that I wanted to do clinical psychology, and I had a lot of friends. I was surrounded by a lot of people who were struggling with mental health, who were struggling with self-injury, who were struggling with suicide. And it was just kind of like this thing that I was already like always surrounded by. And I remember like in 9th grade was the first time I, talked to someone who was feeling really suicidal and trying to figure out how I can be there for them. And so it's been like, I've been around it for most of my life. It just kind of turned into this not fascination, but this interest in terms of like, well, what is it that make people think about suicide? What's causing these thoughts? How do we help? And how do we, not stop someone, but like how do we make them feel like life is worth living? And so that's
Mm.
kind of been like this big question mark in my life, for the majority of high school, college, all the way through grad school. And so this interest has kind of stuck with me. I think I would say like starting in like ninth grade, I knew I wanted to do suicide and self-injury research, which is again very nerdy. I remember just like cleaning up my parents' house and like finding this like my old agenda from
Ooh.
ninth grade, and it was like, here are some potential research ideas, and I was just like, oh, I actually ended up doing all those studies. So it's kind of like a
Oh,
weird
that's so
nerdy kind of thing.
cool. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. I love that. Wait, that's the kind of passion. I would say that's like super, super unique. I mean, I definitely had guests on before who have talked about like being interested in mental health always, but that's really unique to know. I always thought that I was so weird because I was the kid who like wore button down shirts and like collared jackets in high school. And I was like, I was just a mini version of myself starting at like the age of 14. So I can relate to that in a very, very weird, very weird way, but I appreciate that. Yeah, so that sounds like an amazing journey and getting there and on the road. And have you ever kind of been weighed down by like this is a really heavy topic, or like the purpose of what you're doing has been higher than that and kind of prevented it from feeling too heavy? If that, I don't know if that makes sense, but
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I like whenever I talk to my parents about it, they've always been like, "That's kind of a really heavy topic that you want to carry." And I don't know what it's been. I think like just that passion that I've had since I was growing up, like and up until now, that's really pulled me through and kind of kept me going in terms of studying this material. Like I just have, I know it's really heavy stuff, and oftentimes, I have a lot of my own coping that I need to do to take care
mhm,
of myself
mhm.
after a rough day. But it's just such significant and worthwhile, and just I don't want to say gratifying, but like it's really just important work, and I feel like there's a really big need for it. And
Yeah.
whether it's in the clinical realm or in the research realm, this is kind of where my heart is. And so I worked at a crisis center for a little bit during college, right before grad school. And in grad school, I really kind of like every supervisor that I came upon, I was just like, I need to see the suicidal patients. Like, give me the really high risk folks because I want to help these people. And really gained a lot of experience over the years, kind of both clinically and in research in this area. And I think it's being passionate about it and have it being such a personal topic for me has made it easy for me to kind of keep going. And self care obviously is a
Right.
really big part of that.
Right. Okay. So diving into this, but with a little bit of maybe pointed interest. When did you start looking out for those signs? So you mentioned in ninth grade you started seeing like friends who were struggling and really wanting to help them. And when did you start looking out for those signs and then really trying to like cipher out like, oh, that actually is a thing that if maybe a few of my friends who are suicidal have in common. This is very different. And when we talked before, you talked about the fact that like there's almost predicting factors, but also there aren't. So
Mhm.
let's dive into that. I want to hear all about that.
Yeah. I think part of why my friends opened up to me and why I kind of heard a lot about this stuff when I was in high school was just because I was a really open person. I think most folks felt like I was pretty approachable. And I think one of the things is just not being afraid to talk about it, which is something that we tell
Mm,
people a lot is if
hmm.
you're not afraid to talk about it and you're willing to kind of bring that out in the open, people who are thinking about suicide and people who are, really struggling with suicidal thoughts, they're going to open up to you and
Hmm.
find a way to connect with you. And that actually, like, you being willing to talk to them and not being scared of them having suicidal thoughts and not being like, I need to call 911 right away,
Right, right,
like
right.
that gets so far with people, because it shows that you're willing to listen and you're willing to
Yes.
support them, and that they're not this like complete weirdo for
Right,
having these thoughts, right? And
right.
so um I think a lot of it was just kind of my personality and growing up has kind of really helped with that. And just kind of like I don't know, I'm kind of weird, oddly not fearless when it comes to stuff like this. And I'm just kind of a bit of a, I don't know, not blunt, but like I'm pretty straightforward with things.
Hmm.
I think for a lot of folks who are struggling with suicidal thoughts, they just weren't really afraid to kind of open up. But in terms of like me kind of picking out people or like looking out for signs, I don't know that I can say that I'm really good at picking out signs.
Mm.
Um, I think I'm good at asking, because like I mentioned to you,
That is
suicide is,
that's a huge distinction. That is the distinction. It's not about like that's a suicidal person. It's about like, hey, how are you feeling? Oh my
yeah,
gosh, it's such a simple
yeah,
thing, but
exactly.
it goes so far. Sorry. Go ahead.
No, yeah, no worries. And that's the thing, right? Like oftentimes, like with suicide, there's no one clear path. It's not like everybody who dies by suicide has gone through, these things and these things and these
Mm-hmm.
things. Like
Mm-hmm.
there's no set formula for creating a person who's going to think about suicide. Everybody arrives in this moment from a different place. And people make different journeys to get to a place where they're thinking about suicide. And so you can't really say that like, oh, they're depressed and therefore they might be suicidal, like, or like, they I don't know, they're using substances, therefore they
Mm-hmm.
might be suicidal. Sometimes that's true, sometimes that's not. And like the research has shown us, like there's really not a clear indicator of whether or not someone's going to attempt suicide, except for maybe having like various serious plans about suicide, and also having a history of attempting suicide. In those cases, those are the folks who are higher
Right.
risk for
Right.
actually attempting. But aside from that, we really don't have a lot of, clear signs that are like flashing before us. And
Sure.
so whenever people I know lose a loved one to suicide, and they're like, I can't believe I didn't see the signs. Like one of the big things that I really often tell them is like, there might not have been clear signs. It's hard to pick them up and it's hard to see them. And, unless that person's like, unless you're asking and that person's telling you point blank, you're not going
Right.
to know what's going on in their mind. And I think, oftentimes people blame themselves a lot when they have a loved
Right.
one die by suicide, that like, I can't believe I didn't see it coming. And sometimes you can't, even the
Yeah.
professionals can't.
Right.
And so, yeah, uh, I don't, kind of took a weird tangent
No,
down that road.
I got the answer I wanted, fam. I don't know. That makes a lot of sense. I was 9 Perfect Strangers. I don't know if you did you end up watching that?
I don't
I
think
don't
so.
want to spoil it for anybody, but like they approach this topic in a very interesting way. And okay, so because I don't want to spoil it for anybody, I guess I'm not going to go further down that road. But they do a very interesting thing about like a family healing after one of their family members dies by suicide, and they kind of go down the route that you're describing of like, well, what if it was just suicide? And that's a really I think like many things we discuss every day, it's complicated topics that people want simple answers to, like, oh, it was this, I just missed the sign and it's totally my fault and now I can blame myself for the rest of my life. And that's just not how humans emotions or anything works. Yeah.
No, it's much more complex.
Right. So that brings us kind of perfectly into so what are that is a myth in itself. So what are other things that like people say about suicidal people that are just like total nonsense baloney?
Um, I think one of the ones that really strike me is always this myth of like people who die by suicide are selfish. I think a lot of
Mm,
times that comes up quite a bit, right? Like they're doing this because, they don't want to deal with things anymore. And I think something that's really stood out through my research is, and also in my clinical work with folks who are suicidal, oftentimes they're really not, they don't think that they're being selfish because they feel like they're a burden to other people in their lives.
right.
And sorry, this gets me a little emotional because it's so sad.
No, it's
um
okay.
but they oftentimes folks who are thinking about suicide, they're really struggling with the fact that like, the people in my life might be better off with me not here because I'm such a big burden, right? And so oftentimes they're doing it because they feel like the people, like their children, their partners, their loved ones, their family or their friends are kind of like they would have a better life without them. And so in a way it's kind of like, it's not really as oftentimes not a selfish decision. It's more like, hey, like I really want you to have a better life, and I believe that the only way there is for me to not be here. So that's one that always like hits hard for me.
That as I talk about this pretty openly obviously on the show because I talk about my experience, and as somebody who was there in that moment, that's yeah, that resonates very much. It was and hearing, and we're having people in chat share, thank you so much for sharing that, like people will tell you that you are being selfish. And so I think that's a really, really good reminder to people who might be experiencing suicidal ideation that like you're not selfish. You're just not. I don't, yeah. Um, so that's a really big one. You also touched upon the fact that um, kind of asking people point blank is important, and that's one that they teach you in mental health first aid, that like you should not be afraid to just, if you feel like somebody might be suicidal, the best thing that you, well, not like the best, but one of the better things that you can do is ask them if you are comfortable, because it is understood that like that's still a very heavy, difficult question to ask somebody. Hey, do you feel like you don't want to live anymore? But asking that point blank, yeah, I would love to learn about that.
Yeah, and that ties in with another myth, right? Oftentimes people think like, oh, if somebody's not thinking about suicide and you ask them about suicide, it's going to put that idea in their head.
Right, right.
But the thing is, that's like with a lot of the research has shown that that's actually not true. When you bring up like, it's really interesting. There was a study that I read, and that I cite frequently, where when you ask people about suicide, instead of their suicidal ideation going up, their suicidal ideation actually comes down a little bit after you've asked,
Because you
because they feel
validated
like
them.
yeah, you validated them, you asked, and you kind of acknowledge that, like, they're going through a difficult time. Oh my gosh, now I forgot the question.
I'm so sorry. No.
um,
So myths. If you ask somebody
yeah.
if they're suicidal, you're gonna put it in their
Oh
head.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so then something that, like, people always feel uncomfortable with is like, well, what if I'm wrong? What if I ask them and they're not actually thinking about suicide, and it's kind of awkward now, and like um and maybe it puts this idea in their head. Well, first of all, it doesn't put the idea in their head,
Right.
but second of all, something that I tell everybody that I come across when we're talking about these things is that, like, would you rather be wrong and maybe have an awkward moment for 15 minutes, maybe an awkward week, whatever
Right.
that may be,
Right.
right? Or would you rather not ask, right? Have that person actually be thinking about suicide, end up dying by suicide, and regretting that for the rest of your life. Like, personally, I would much rather go for the like potential 15 minutes of awkwardness where I'm wrong and they're not
Mm-hmm.
thinking about suicide, than to not actually ask and not being able to be there to support them and help them. And so, that is something that is important, is making sure that, like, you're willing to ask, especially if you're kind of able to. And with my graduate students, where I'm teaching them how to do suicide risk assessment, I'm like, look, you got to practice until you're comfortable. Like, it's a like, for me, like, whenever I ask somebody if they're thinking about suicide, my heart still races, I'm still sweating, like, and it's been years and years and years since I first started doing suicide risk assessments and whatnot. It's still a heavy topic, it's scary, and it's uncomfortable. But the thing is, like, if you can kind of push past that and ask, it can make such a huge difference for that person. And so, of course, again, self-care is super important, right?
Right.
Kind of know where your own boundaries are. But if you feel like you can and you want to be able to be there for people who are suicidal, maybe you have a family member or a friend that who is thinking about suicide, or who you think might be thinking about suicide, and you really want to talk to them about it, it doesn't hurt to kind of practice asking that question just like over and over again in the mirror, until you're kind of like ready to ask it to them. And so I have my students like practice all the time, like with
Wow.
their, like, in practice therapy sessions with their colleagues in front of a mirror, just kind of practice getting those words out. So then that way it's a little bit less anxiety provoking and come time for the real thing.
Wow. Wow. So my natural next question is, so this, just to give you an idea of what this is informed by, and I've come to terms with it, but I'd like to kind of work through this with you.
Yeah.
I had a friend when I was in college who called me, and I was away on, like, I was a few states away from where they were. They were back in my home state, and I was a few states away. And they called me and they said, well, because you left me, I am going to drive around until I crash my car and die. And so my immediate reaction was to call emergency services. I called the state that I was, if you call 911 wherever you are in the US, it's going to immediately go to the closest police department. So I called them and I was like, I need the non-emergency number for like, I need a way to reach my friend who is 2 states away, and I have no idea how to do that, because if I just dial 911, it's going to go to this state's 911. And so long story short, I went through all these things, and they ended up sending a check-in on that person, and they absolutely hated me after that, and they refused to talk to me. We didn't talk for 7 years. And it was because what they said is I had no right to do that, and I embarrassed them in front of their parents, and their parents didn't know that they were experiencing suicidal thoughts, and that they were just, quote, kidding. And so I would love to know if there is better steps that I could have, like, I think I know now after many years and having been an advocate and taken enough training, but I would love to talk through that scenario. You know, if somebody's experiencing that and somebody calls them and goes, I'm gonna go die, like, what would maybe more appropriate steps be in that scenario?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just want to validate that that's such a rough experience. And I've had similar experiences where I've like lost friends because I'm like I really wanted to keep you safe, and this was the only way I knew how. So I really want to validate that that's a rough experience.
Thank you.
It's something that like, so things that I've learned along the way in terms of things that you can do. So I mean, if there's an opportunity, right, to like talk to them, maybe like asking them like, do you have a plan? Like, what's your plan looking like? Do you have a timeline? Just to kind of get an idea of like how detailed of a plan they have. Most times for folks who are suicidal, they'll have a pretty detailed plan mapped out, and the more detailed the plan, usually we see that as being more and more high risk.
Okay.
And so usually I would ask like, you know, if that was to happen to me, I would probably ask like, hey, like, okay, you're thinking about suicide. Do you have a plan? How are you going to do it? When are you going to do it? And just to kind of get some additional information. And then the next thing I would do is usually kind of try and come up with like, well, obviously throughout this whole time, I'm going to be really validating, right? And just kind of being supportive and warm, but also kind of trying to figure out like, okay, what can we do to keep you safe? And one of the things that I like to do with folks now is to kind of come up with a safety plan together or a rainy day plan together. And another thing that you can do if you're not feeling like you're kind of up to helping in that moment, you know, you're kind of lost and you're not sure what to do. Something that can be really useful instead of calling 911 right away might be to call the crisis line. So the National Crisis Line is a great resource to use in these scenarios because you don't have to be the one who's suicidal to call. You can call to get support in terms of helping somebody that you know who's having thoughts about suicide. And so you can always give the National Crisis Line a call and be like, hey, I have this friend who's suicidal, would love to kind of get a check-in on them. I just don't really know how to do this appropriately. You know, do you have some thoughts on how I could do that? Can we call them together and kind of have you kind of, you know, talk to them while I'm here? You can kind of not negotiate, but kind of come up with a plan with the National Crisis Line to talk with your friend. So then that way the crisis line can be the ones to make the decisions as to like, okay, we're going to send emergency services versus not. They can do a more detailed risk assessment, right? And kind of work with the person to make sure that they can stay safe, and kind of, you know, put the layers in between kind of calling before calling emergency services, if that makes sense.
Especially, yeah, and looking back, also one of the lessons that I've learned, my friend was not white, so that could have also not just that could have went poorly. On one hand, yes, like I'm happy that I called because I'd rather not talk to them for 7 years and they'd be alive than the opposite happened. But like knowing what I know now, I would have sought out a non-emergency number and seen what the state's options are and all of that. But yeah, so that's, I wanted to add that layer. I know we don't have really enough time to like deeply go into that, but yes, it's way better, as you said, to call the suicide prevention lifeline if you can before, especially in the US and especially if your friend is not white. So that kind of brings me, before we go into, I want to create a crisis plan with you because I think that is just so important for everybody to do. But before we go into that, so what happens if, because you mentioned, I come up to my friend and I ask them point blank, are you having suicidal thoughts? And then they say, what are you, crazy? You're such an asshole. I can't believe you would say, you know, and they just like go off on you and they explode. Or you come up to your friend and you're like, hey, do you think we could call the prevention hotline together? Because I feel like something's really, you're not feeling well. What are the mistakes of doing that, I guess? And, what do you do if your friend is just completely flat out rejecting you and you're still like really scared for their life?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's two scenarios here. Right? The
Yeah.
first one
Yeah.
being like asking, they're like, "Are you crazy?" and
Yeah.
whatnot. In those scenarios, I usually just kind of, I'm like, "Hey, I just was wondering because I'm worried about you and all that stuff like that." So usually I don't kind of just go for the jugular with the
Right.
question, right?
Right.
Right. Most times I like to kind of frame it a little bit, so then
Okay.
that way they know why I'm asking this question. And so usually, I might preface it with, "Hey, like, I've noticed that you haven't been sleeping a lot lately. You've been kind of, really depressed and kind of giving away all of your stuff. And I'm just really worried. And
Hmm.
I want to know if you're thinking about suicide." Right. And so it's a natural flow into the conversation. They kind of know what's coming, or they can kind of see maybe what's coming.
Hmm.
And usually that's kind of, I found that that's been more well received than if I
Okay.
just went for like, "Are you thinking about suicide?"
Yeah.
It kind of eases that question a little bit.
It's a lot
And
less
then,
pointed and less
yeah,
accusatory. It doesn't imply that like you're wrong for having suicide, right? It gives that little
mhm,
warm up of like, I'm worried about you, and that is why I
mhm.
suspect this, instead of being pointed.
Yeah, for sure. And usually in those cases, they don't really come back kind of in a more aggressive way. But if they do come back and they're kind of like, "No, like, how can you even think that, da 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 da," right? Usually in that case, I'm just kind of like, "Hey, like, I just want to know if you're not, that's fine. If
Hmm.
you are, like, I'm here for you. I just wanted to like check and make sure that everything's okay," and just kind of back off of that a little bit. And the thing is, like, oftentimes if they just know that you're ready to have that conversation, maybe that was their initial reaction. But if they kind of come down and they're kind of like, "Well, like, I am having suicidal thoughts, and maybe this person can care about me," if they're kind of struggling to
Hmm.
find
Hmm.
someone to talk to, they might see you as someone that they can come to, right? And so that's kind of the first scenario, my answer to what I would do in that first scenario. The second one, where it's more kind of like, what was it again? It was, if you were trying to keep them safe, they're not really willing to kind of go with you
Yeah.
or kind of work with you to make sure they
Right.
stay
Right.
safe.
Right.
Um, Usually, again, like that, uh, I try to escalate things very slowly to the
Fair
best of my
enough.
ability. I like to go slow. And so usually in those cases where I'm kind of like, "Hey, I'm really worried," right? Like, "Are you willing to maybe like, um, like, let me hold on to your gun, or like let me hold on to your medications and stuff like that." If they're not willing to do that, right, then you can kind of slowly escalate. Like, "I'm really worried about you. Are you willing to kind of go to the hospital with me, or like have like talk to the crisis line with me?" You can kind of go in that direction in increasing kind of the escalating the situation. However, I found that that hasn't been super helpful for me, in that, like, if
Okay.
they're not going to, like, let you help them in this moment, like, they're not going to be willing to go to the hospital, obviously, right?
Right.
And so, um, in kind of some of my clinical experiences and trainings, there's this other strategy, which is kind of taking a more door in the face kind of strategy versus like a foot in the door, where you're kind of like,
Mm.
"Hey, like, I'm really worried about you. Would you be willing to go to the hospital with me to stay safe?" "No." "Okay, let's take that down a notch. How about like if we just talk to the crisis services, right? Like,
Mm.
or how about we just kind of talk, like, talk about some things that we can do to like help you kind of just survive this really difficult moment, and slowly work your way down." I
Okay.
wouldn't start at like, the height of it and be like, "I'm going to call 911," because
Right.
then
Right.
that
Right. Right.
sets them
Right.
off completely, right? But you might want to start with like, "Can I take you to the hospital?" And then slowly work backwards from there, if that makes sense.
Okay. All right. So
Yeah.
what I'm going to do is we do have some questions already coming in for you, which are, I think, are really cool, and the community is very, very excited to have you answer them. So what I think we'll do is I will ask the first one while I set us up to be able to create the crisis plan, because I have to make the screen look all pretty.
Mhm.
So if that's okay, Nanosphere has the first question, and that oh okay, wait, one was missed. Okay. How would you open the conversation with religious people who don't treat mental health seriously? For example, my father talked about suicide last time, and I saying, "I hope God smites me already," and I sort of don't know how to approach it because he turns everything into a joke. So anyway, what should I do?
Yeah, that's really challenging. And oftentimes, with like, I'm trying to think. I actually was just reading a book on how to do CBT in a religiously kind of competent
Oh,
way. Um, but I think, something that might be helpful is, if they're kind of talking about it in a religious kind of way, we're more responding on that same level. So, for example, if he's kind of saying like, oh, what was it? Like, I wish God would just
smite.
smite me
Yeah.
kind of thing. Um, Maybe kind of like coming back with like like, I don't know, it seems like that wouldn't be similar to what would be going on in scripture or something, right? Like God
Uh-huh.
is, somebody that loves everybody and just kind of wants to give everyone a chance. Why would he do that? Like, you know, like I, I'm trying to think. That's a really challenging question. Um,
No, no, take your time. I
yeah,
think maybe what you're trying to say is, I guess, like meet them where they are, like go through maybe a little bit of like their logic or um asking. So like in that case, I guess it's more about maybe, especially for somebody who makes things as a joke and whose coping mechanism is a joke, would it be prudent to kind of let them know that like, hey, like, hi, I see you're kidding, but like if you weren't kidding, just letting you know that like we could talk about it, or like is there a way to approach it like that?
yeah. I think that's exactly what it is. I'm so glad you're here to pull all my thoughts together for me.
That's what I do. That's what I
Or
do.
yeah, like exactly what you're saying, right? Like meet them where they're at because not everybody's going to be ready to have this conversation with you. And so, like you said, like meeting them where they're at is super important. So if they're kind of like joking about it, but you're actually kind of worried, you can kind of like laugh along, but kind of be like, but seriously, like that actually makes me really worried that you said that, and like, and kind of let them know, like if you're thinking about suicide, like I'm here for you, and I just want you to know that we can have this conversation. Like, if you want to have this conversation, we can. And just kind of again leaving that on the table for them. Um, they can take it, they can leave it, they can take it later, right? And yeah, yeah, exactly that. Like meeting people where they're at is super important.
All right, I am ready to transition us into crisis plan. We will get back to a few more questions, but I want to make sure we get through this. If you would like to follow along with us, please, please, please do. So all I'm doing here is I'm opening Google Doc, and we're gonna go from there.
You can
So
also do it the old school way with a little index card and a pen.
a
I
pen and
usually keep those
pencil.
on.
That's what are we, non-techno? No, I'm kidding. Do what you have to do. Whatever you have in front of you. I don't care if it's a post-it. Make it happen. All right, so let's move on over. Okay. All right. Studio mode off. Okay, so let's. Can you see? Okay. All right. I think everybody can see as well as possible. Okay. So how do I do how do I do
Yeah,
this?
well, first of all, let me just kind of give a summary of like what we're trying to do here,
Okay,
right?
right.
So the thing that I want to do together is called, you can call it safety planning, you can call it crisis response planning, you can call it making a coping plan, you can call it whatever you want. It can be a rainy day plan, whatever it is. The thing is, the idea here is that, you don't make a hurricane preparedness kit when the hurricane's like hitting you, right? You start preparing for the hurricane, like when hurricane season starts, but also like you always have a hurricane preparedness kit on you, right? And so the idea here is the same with an emotional crisis. You might not be experiencing an emotional crisis right now. Maybe you won't experience it a month, later, right? Or maybe it'll be years until you experience a really big emotional crisis. But the idea is to just have a plan ready when that moment hits. Because the thing is, we're all going to hit that moment at one point in our lives. I don't think any of us are kind of free from, having any kind of emotional crisis. We're all going to have a bad day. To what degree that looks like for each of us, that might be different but all of us will have a bad day where we basically struggle to just kind of get through the day. And so what I want to do, what I love about this plan is it's very versatile, and it really just focuses on like, okay, like how do we make sure that when you do hit this emotional crisis that you can, you have the tools to kind of survive this moment. um, and so it's very simple. There's just kind of four main parts to this plan, and you'll see this plan in all sorts of interventions. for folks who are struggling with thoughts about suicide, self-injury. You know, this comes up a lot in different interventions. It's called different things in different interventions, but the idea is the same. We're kind of creating a plan in the event of an emotional crisis. So just kind of setting things up. There's 4 main categories that we're going to kind of work through. So on my little card here, usually I like to write at the very top, I have my reasons for living. And then down here, I have some warning signs. So we can kind of start with reasons for living. So when we think about our reasons for living, these are the things that kind of get you up and going throughout the in the morning. So who do you wake up for? Why do you wake up for them? And why is that important to you? And I really want you to think about them in detail, right? Like, so for example, for me, one of my reasons for living are my 2 dogs. They're absolutely hilarious. One is like obsessed with squirrels right now, and there's a squirrel that
Yes.
just loves to taunt her
Oh my
outside the
gosh.
window.
Yes.
And watching her freak out just like puts a smile on my face. And so, just like think like I'm sure there's like things like that for you too, right? Maybe it's a pet, maybe it's your
Yes.
child,
Yes.
maybe it's, a friend and stuff like that, right? So like, what are some of the things that bring a smile to your face that makes life worth living for you?
Okay, so I'm gonna write down my partner. Yeah, he was the reason that I got through some really, really rough times. He has shown me that, the fact that I do live with depression and suicidal ideation doesn't make me broken, doesn't make me less of anything. Like, he's loved me through all of it and wanted nothing but for me to be the best version of myself, whatever that means that day. And for me to learn to appreciate who I am in a like by seeing it through his eyes. It sounds so like I'm like tearing up, but like he would see me as the person that I wanted to be. Like, I wanted to live up to the person that he believed that I was, and he gave me that reason every day, even when I didn't believe in myself.
Yeah, that's such a big one. Like having a supportive partner can be so helpful, and just like definitely like they see the best of ourselves even when we're having the crappiest times. Um,
Then I have my
that's
dog.
awesome.
Wait, how many do I need? Because I think I have a
I
few.
usually I come up with like usually I come up with like 3 to 5. I just
Okay.
have a weird number thing with 3s and 5s.
Sure. No. Three's a great starting point. So I'm gonna say my
Yeah.
dog. Uh,
Mhm.
and then I the community knows. They knew how cheesy I am. So I am gonna go ahead and say this community. Like, there have been days where I didn't believe in myself again, or I thought I was a waste of space, or I thought I didn't deserve to be alive. And not only did they remind me that, like, hey, you're doing something amazing that's helping other people, but they were also just, again, just there to validate me on days where I couldn't validate myself, where they're like, no, you deserve living, you deserve to take up the space you do for no other reason than, like, you just exist. So I'm gonna go ahead and put down the Sparks Anxiety community. There were so many days where they like lifted me up. Now, again, not because even like, hey, you're our streamer, but like, just like, hey, you're a person and you deserve to be loved. Remember you said that before. And I'm like, okay, yeah, I said that. But when you're depressed and feeling like crap, you're like, yeah, but that doesn't apply to me. Everybody else deserves living, but not me. And they're like, no, that's not how the rules work. So
Yeah.
it's pretty cool to have them be, I'm like blushing and getting all hot and thinking about it, and just very, 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 very grateful. Yeah, thank you to Google for auto-correcting Mxiety to anxiety. Excuse you, Google. Excuse you. But yeah, I think, and then I'm gonna cheat and I'm gonna say a fourth one, which is
Go for it.
which is just like, it sounds super cheesy now that I'm not suicidal, but it really was a thing. Just experiencing the world, being able to experience the world and see what's going to happen tomorrow. Like, that was a reason that kept me here. Like, and some days, okay, so like for example, I watched the movie Soul, and without trying to ruin the ending or anything, but I remember at the end, I got to the end of that movie and I was like, man, if I had died, I wouldn't have been able to experience this like brilliant point about life and living, and I wouldn't have seen this thing, and it wouldn't have given me this like new energy to keep going. And it's everything like that. It's, there will be a sunset that I'll see and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe like I almost died and didn't catch this rainbow, this sunset, this hike, this you know, these kids playing across the street and being silly, like just all these moments that would be completely gone if I wasn't, like, I would not be there to experience them. Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. I really do love that. Like, first of all, there's community reasons for living, like reasons for living that are kind of outside of you, right? Like
Right.
people you love, people you have to take care of, people who are supportive of you. But I also love that you have one that's like, just you. Like, I just really so glad that like I could get to experience all of these things, and see these beautiful sunsets and everything like that. Like, I really love when folks kind of like, or even when I'm doing these safety plans with people, oftentimes people will live for other people. There's lots of reasons
Yeah.
for living outside of you. And so sometimes I try to encourage people to just think about like, okay, well, but what about for you? Like, what about something that's you're living for yourself for? And that's a kind of exact, I love that that was your fourth
Oh,
toss in.
yes. Thank you. Okay, I'm doing a good job, everybody. This is totally playing into like my problem of like making my therapist like me, of like, am I doing it right, teacher? Like, that's another thing to revisit another day, but I'm gonna, where it's out there now. Okay. All right, warning signs.
Yeah, so I really want to encourage folks, like, this is like when you're kind of doing these crisis plans, it doesn't have to be this like deep dark thing that you're doing with your family members, your friends, your kids, your partner and whatnot. Like, it can be a conversation like this, and it's a great way to just kind of talk about like what keeps you going, like what helps you wake up in the morning, just to get to know the people around you a little bit more, because I'm learning so much about Marie right now.
Right. No, it's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like there was that article in the New York Times that was oh my god, I can't get it to do this bullet thing, so I guess it's not doing it, but it was about like 12 12 questions to ask to have somebody fall in love with you, and all of them, I know it's a little tangential, but just bear with me, but all of them were connecting back to the fact of like they were just deeper than questions people normally ask. Like, it was about like what makes you tick, instead of like how many kids do you want to have, like it's yeah. So I feel like having these conversations with, I think that's why I feel also so connected with my community, because we do talk about this. It's not like, it's fun to talk about like what's your favorite video game, but being able to dive into this stuff and knowing that about other people is pretty cool.
Yeah, for sure. And the thing is, it's cool too, like, because you have to update your plan, just like how you have to update your hurricane preparedness kit. Can't have cookies in there for like 5 years and
Right.
expect them not to go stale.
Right.
And so this is a conversation that people can have you can have it every September because it's Suicide Prevention Month,
Mm-hmm.
or like October because it's Mental Health Month, right? And you can
Mm-hmm.
kind of see how people's reasons for living change throughout their lives, and it's just such a great way to like touch base on like, hey, like, what keeps you going now, because maybe that's changed for some people. But any hoozles, I didn't want to forget
No, we're
that
both
point of
geeking out.
make
It's
this a
all good. It's
conversation.
all good.
Yeah. So the next category then is warning signs. So these are things that, or like potential triggers, right? And so these are kind of things that I like to think to myself, if say like my partner were to see me start doing these things, that maybe he'll want to like, come in and help me cope, or like that he can kind of come in and,
Yep.
provide me with some comfort. So these could be things like, if you notice that you are laying in bed and not able to get up in the morning, or maybe it's like if you're noticing that you can't stop ruminating, you can't stop just like replaying these moments over and over and over in your head, or it could be that you're like really really agitated, like the smallest thing can tick you off. Everybody has different warning signs, everybody has different triggers, so like think for yourself, like what are some of the things that that can give you an idea of like, oh, I'm not going down a path that I would like. I'm going down a deep dark path. I'm spiraling a little bit. But yeah.
Okay, so I don't think that this is my first one, but I'm gonna put it down as my first one. I'm gonna need you to just go with me on this one, but listening to Coldplay. So
Okay.
the reason that happens is I have found, like, so for me, I'm usually like, I get you know how you like crave food and you'll be like, I could really eat a steak right now, or like I really want sushi. I will get that
Mhm.
way about music.
Yeah.
And so I
I'm the
will,
same way.
yeah, yeah. So I'll be like, man, I really want some Tool, right? And sometimes I use that as a moment to reflect back on how I'm feeling. And 99% of, like, there's 1% of time where I listen to Coldplay because, like, old school Coldplay is just like great, right? But
Mhm.
then there is that, like, all that really, really good chance that I'm listening to Coldplay because I'm trying to like soothe something and I'm going through something and I'm not ready to confront it yet. But
Mhm.
it's usually like a secondary thing where I'll put on Coldplay and I'll be like, ah, a little depressing. I'm a little like, it's a sign for me to like kick things off. Another thing that's like that, so maybe it could be a broader, like, putting on comfort things, and leaning
Mhm.
into comforts often. So like
Mhm.
I'll watch Tangled again. I'll watch Lilo and Stitch again. So I have movies and I have music that will like set off that little radar of like, I'm this is a comfort thing, and it could be a
Mhm.
really just good coping skill. Like, hey, I need a little bit of warm fuzziness. But if I'm
Mhm.
doing it a lot, like if I've noticed, I'm really leaning into all those comforts, like it could be a sign that I'm looking for comforts very frequently, and that's a sign that something else is going on.
Yeah. Very similar to you, Marie. Like, one of mine is like listening to Linkin Park. Like, Linkin Park just brings me back to high school when I was going through a rough time. And like, I know that I'm not okay when I start to listen to like Numb on loop. Like,
Yep.
it just keeps going and
Yellow.
going and going. I
Yep.
won't stop it. That's when I know like, oh, I'm not in a good place right now.
Yeah. 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 When you're like, and like I said, it's a secondary sign where you like put it on and then you're listening to it and it's the fourth time we're going around Fix You. And I'm like, hmm, something
Yeah.
else. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Um,
Okay. Uh, Another one is I am really quick to get out of bed. And so if I've noticed for a few days that like I just can't, like, I'm sitting there and just scrolling through Twitter and I've noticed I'm like late for work and I just cannot get, like, I will know I'll eventually do it, but
mhm.
if it takes me more than like 20 minutes, it's usually like a, hey, this could be a red flag kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really big one for a lot of folks, right? Like when you're feeling depressed or when you're just kind of really struggling, like not being able to get out of bed is a really big one. I'm the same way too. Like, if I can't get up in the morning, I know that like things are kind of rough because I'm usually a pretty big morning person. My partner always laughs at me. He's like, "You're like," he's like so grumpy in the mornings, and I'm just like rainbows and sunshine and everything wonderful, and he's just like, how do you have so much energy in the morning?
Right.
But like
Right.
when I can't even get myself to the coffee machine to like put on coffee, like
Something's up.
something something's up. Yeah.
Yeah. In a similar vein to that, so Nanosphere is asking in chat, producer, when he hears Coldplay goes on yellow alert, yes, he will ask me. He'll be like, is this like cool Coldplay or is this like Coldplay, Coldplay? So in that same vein, he will tell me, he'll be like, you haven't been singing to yourself. Like he knows I walk around the house, kind of like you're like, I'll be like chirping, like, oh my God, look. And I also have ADHD. So, oh my God, look, like a new flower is bloomed. Oh my God, this is going on. Oh, the dog is doing this funny thing. Oh, and then I sing a song and then I like sing a song about something I'm doing. And then, so if he notices that like that's not there, he knows to ask me like, hey, you haven't been singing to yourself the past few days. Are you okay? Because like that is a big thing that I just sing stuff as I walk around the house.
Yeah. Um another one for me is I'm actually just doing another updating my plan while we're kind of going through this
Awesome.
too.
Awesome.
So one of mine actually, like, so my dogs can do no wrong,
Yes.
but like if I'm not okay, I'm like agitated to the max at like any little thing. So like my dog
Oh,
Scout can
yeah.
bark at a squirrel and I'm just like, oh, I need you to stop. And I get
Yep.
so angry. And so like when I'm in that mood and I know that I'm like easily agitated and irritated by these little things that I'm usually fine with, then yeah, that's another kind of warning sign for me. Like, oh man, like I am not doing well. I need to take care of myself.
I'm actually taking that one too. That is, yeah, that's definitely it. If I know, like, I'll turn around to my dog and I'll be like, "Why are you doing that?" And he's like, and dogs wear their emotions on their faces, so you immediately have that reflection back of like, "Oh, I know I would never do that. Like, why am I, or I will be maybe shorter with my husband or something, like, or I'll argue with him about something really stupid, and yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, because usually, like, my dog barking at squirrels is like, I think it's the cutest thing ever. And I,
yeah.
of
Like,
course,
oh, he's
I'm
so
like, you're
silly.
a dog mom. But like, yeah, when I'm not okay, I'm just like, stop. You need to get away from that window right now.
Yep, yep, yep.
So you ready to move forward to the next
Yeah,
category?
yeah, I am.
Okay. So the next category, I usually like to make 5, but the next category is coping strategies. So these are things that I want you to think about, things that you can do on your own. I mean, you can have things in there that you can do with other people, like maybe go for a walk with your friend, or like, talk to a friend or something like that. But I usually like to have the majority of these things be things that you can do on your own. So for me, a really big coping strategy I have is singing karaoke. I like
Oh,
those
I
power
love it.
ballads. And so I just put it on YouTube and I just like go for it. And like
Yes.
I can feel it's like such a good like way to get my feelings off of my chest. And so like karaoke is a really big coping strategy for me.
I have to ask, have you seen Agretzko on Netflix? Okay, so
No.
it's
Oh wait. Agretsuko. Yes.
yeah, Grisuko.
Yes, I
Yeah,
have.
yeah, 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 yeah. Sorry, I pronounced it. Yeah, yeah. She sings karaoke. That's like how she copes. Yes, yes,
Exactly that. Yeah.
absolutely that. Yeah, perfect, perfect. But so I guess like my warning signs are also a little bit of my coping strategies. Like I will lean into, I will give myself, 10 minutes to just stop what I'm doing and either drink some tea, look out the window, just anything that's like regrounding and reminding me of my mindfulness practice.
Yeah. I love that. Grounding techniques is such a helpful thing to do in these moments. Like even just like lighting a candle that smells nice and
Yep.
just focusing on the scent of the candle can be such a big one.
Yep.
I'm very like sensory oriented. And so for me, that's like getting into a warm shower. So sometimes when I'm
Yeah.
having a rough day, like I shower maybe like 3, 4 times because I just like being in the shower is so comforting for me.
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that one. Recently, so I recently started when I feel agitated and angry and don't know what to do. Like when I'm in that state of like I have emotions and I don't know where to put them. Like I don't know if I'm sad yet. I don't know if I'm angry. I just know I'm like all kinds of things. I love doing Melissa. I recently signed up for them and they've been so awesome. Melissa Wood Health does videos and you sign up and the first week I think is $0, but then after that it's $9.99 a month. And I can't bring myself to go to the gym, but I can bring myself to do one of her 10-minute workouts every time. Even if, and I will tell myself, like, you can half-ass it, you can do some of it, you can do 2 reps instead of 10, like, whatever it is, just like put it on and do as much as you can. And I don't always end up feeling better, but it always gives me a moment of like reset and also something to do with all of that, like, I don't know what's going on in my head energy.
Yeah, that's a great one. It's like exercise is one of the big like distress tolerance skills. And oftentimes, like even when I was working inpatient with folks, they don't have access to a lot of exercise videos or equipment or anything like that because they're kind of inside the hospital. So we'll do like jumping jacks at the end of the hallway together just to
Ooh.
kind of like get their heart rate up. to kind of give them that like that outlet, and get some exercise in to like help cope with the difficult emotion in the moment.
I do want to be conscious of your time. Are you okay for like another half
Yeah,
hour? Okay.
I
All
have
right.
nothing after this. So.
Okay, well then I have you for the rest. No, I'm kidding. Okay, and then somebody brought up weighted blanket, and I'm going to use that. Just sitting down and prioritizing something that I know makes me feel good. So whether that's sitting down and watching nonsense TV, or sitting down and just like cuddling with my pup, but like it has to be under a fuzzy, cozy, warm, possibly weighted blanket. Depends on if I know I'm really not feeling good, if I'm willing to go upstairs and grab my weighted blanket off my bed. Like depends on how you know how I guess like lazy I am to complete the comfort, but at the very least to get under a blanket and just zone out in some way, shape, or form, and just take care of myself, and what like work on take that moment to like not berate myself. Like that's kind of, I think it's maybe a two-parter, and I'm cheating here a little bit, but it is about like, because what will normally happen is I'll start taking care of myself, and then my brain's like, you don't deserve to take care of yourself, you're so lazy, you're so whatever, and so it's like I almost lean into it to piss off my brain. Like, oh yeah, we're lazy, watch me do nothing.
Yeah, that's I'm the same way. I love my weighted blanket. I actually
Yeah.
have one upstairs in my office, and I have one in my bedroom.
See, I need
Because
to
I
invest
just
in the
like,
second one. Yeah.
yeah, it's so helpful. Just like having that weight. Or sometimes I'll tell my partner to like just squish me, just like lay on top of me and squish me.
Yes. Yes, I've done that too. Or he'll just do that. I reference pop culture a lot, but he will joke about that scene in Lilo and Stitch where Nani's trying to aggravate Lilo, and so she's like, "Oh no, gravity's increasing on me." So, and she's like really annoyed with her, so she's like, "Get off of me, I hate you." But like that will happen where I'll be like super upset and annoyed, and my husband will be like, "Oh no, I'm falling on you, and there's nothing you could do." And then I'm like, "Okay, this is kind of really nice being squished like that. I like that." Yeah.
Yeah, that's also so cute that he does that.
It's pretty great.
uh, um, yeah, so like you can come up with like 3 to 5 coping strategies.
Okay.
For folks, if you're kind of doing this with us and you're thinking about like, oh, what can I do kind of thing. Other things that people tend to suggest a lot of is cold showers. So there's actually something really cool called the dive reflex. I don't know if have you ever heard of the dive reflex?
Yeah, it's so when your brain is like when it's a DBT thing, right? Because
Yeah.
yeah, it like changes what your nerve endings are reacting to. So instead of like being all up in your head, they're like focused on, hey, there's a stimuli happening, so we need to react to that instead. And so it like takes you out of your head and into the physical. Am I explaining it correctly?
Yeah, that's part of it. Another really cool thing about the dive reflex that I like have been really just nerding out about is that like it's your body's way of protecting you if you're kind of like in the ocean or something and you're like drowning. So your body will like, pull all of its resources into like keeping you alive. So it'll help you like slow down your breathing. It'll kind of bring down like your adrenaline essentially. So then that way you can kind of think clearly and survive that moment. And so you can kind of trigger that even just by like putting like an ice pack on your face and holding your breath for a little bit, or like dunking your face into like a cold pot. Nobody uses pots anymore.
Something cold.
Yeah. Some kind of tub of water, maybe a bowl of cold water. And so you can activate your dive reflex by doing that, and that helps a lot too. But other folks like to put like going for a walk, going for a run, or taking care of your house plants. Recently for me, like dusting my house plants have been such a big thing for like coping. I have these like fuzzy dusting gloves that I just go and I like touch every single leaf and like.
Oh, that's so nice. That's so nice.
Yeah, yeah. So yeah, like you can come up with as many of coping strategies as you want, but not as many as you want. Like we want to make sure that these are also things that you can do when you're in a really stressed out moment. And so we don't want to, you know, overwhelm you, future you, with like this giant list of things to do. So yeah, like about 3 to 5 things is good for this section.
I'm going to totally promote us, my website. On our website, the community previously had come up with hundreds and hundreds of ideas of things you can do to cope. And it went from like, we put it into categories. So if you go to Mxiety and the blog specifically, we put it in categories of like sitting, moving, like being active. So like it's all so basically depending on where you are, you have several ideas. So if you're like, I don't know where to start. So I don't have the link readily available, but it is on the website that like, maybe if you're like, I can't think of anything, you can go there and you can like, just kind of jot your memory of like, oh yeah, I do like fishing. I'll go fishing as a coping thing. But I also remembered Connect the Dots is huge for me. It totally refocuses my brain. So my husband will literally be like, can you go get your Connect the Dots book maybe? And so yeah, it's been one of those weird things where like I've been really proud of like not having like, you know how you kind of you're like start a journal and you beat yourself up because you're like, oh, I promise I'd write in that journal every day. This is the opposite where I'm like, I used to connect the dots like every day and now I don't have to. And that's how I know I'm like better. Yeah.
Yeah. Extreme connect the dots. It's such a good one to like just help you focus on something else in that moment and like stop ruminating. I love extreme connect the dots. And adult coloring books, that's also another one for I can't color because my mom, like since I was a kid, she's like, you always color outside the lines, you're no good at coloring. So I can't, like, so there's too many memories tied to coloring.
Oh no.
Yeah, so I can't do the coloring, but the dot to dots I could do.
I love that. That's actually exactly how it's at. I was like, if I'm honest with myself, I suck at crafts. And depending on my mood, that will either like, I'll be like, I suck at this and that's good. Or I'll be like, I suck at this and it's another thing I suck at. But Connect the Dots is always, I love it. I have a Lord of the Rings Connect the Dots book. It's perfect.
I love that.
Okay. All right. Sorry. Next one.
So the next thing after you kind of have your coping strategies, and I'll kind of talk about how we put this all together in the end. Okay. But the next thing I want you to think about are people that you can call or talk to when you're really struggling. Okay. And so, you know, oftentimes folks, hopefully these are folks that you can talk to about suicidal thoughts or like you can feel supported by should you be having suicidal thoughts, people you really trust. But at the very least, if you can't think of somebody who, you know, you can't really trust to talk about these heavy things with, just somebody who can take your mind off of things and who can distract you for a little bit is usually kind of helpful. But hopefully, you know, a couple of folks on that list will be people that you can really have a nice conversation with and get some support from.
Okay, so I have my partner, and then I have my sister. It's very interesting because it is one of those, like, I try to balance who I talk to when, which is why you would have several lists, because it's not even like, oh, I feel like I can't talk to my husband about that or something like that. It's more about, I think my sister would be best to support me through this versus my husband will give me this kind of pep talk. So like you kind of have to know, right?
Yeah, exactly. You need to know when when it's helpful for him to crush you versus not.
Right, exactly. Maybe he's good. He can crush me while I talk to somebody on the phone. But yeah, and then there's one wonderful being in the streaming community, which I know he's not watching, but I love him to death. And when it's exactly that, like when it comes to like maybe streaming's getting me down or something about like my success in the space or something, I know to talk to him, and he always knows what to say, and always starting with the question, the consensual question of like, hey, are you in a good space to talk about this right now?
Yeah, for sure. And you know, again, for folks who are kind of following along too, something that I always tell people is like, don't just put down a friend or my cousin on your coping plan. You don't have to share, you know, with us, or, you know, you don't have to share with me who those people are, like what their names are, what their phone numbers are. It's really important in your plan that you name these people. And the
Mm.
main reason being, like, I don't know if you've ever been in a situation like this when you're like in a bad mood and you're like, I'm gonna call a friend, and then you like scroll through your entire contact list and you have like no idea who to call, and you're
Yep.
like, well, I don't want to. And you have all
Hmm.
of these things that can come up. That's like, I shouldn't call that person.
Yep.
And so what that's why we want to name them on this plan, so then that way
Yes.
like, hey, they're on my plan. Maybe you let them know that they're on your plan. Um, so then that way you're not hesitating to call and pick somebody when you're in that crisis.
Okay. All right. I put it for people in the thing. Name them specifically. I'm not doing that for safety reasons, but you should be naming them because nobody can see your note card.
Yeah, like write it down in your note card, who they are. If it's helpful, put down their phone number, that kind of thing. So then that way, they're just within arm's reach when you're kind of stuck in that bad moment.
Yep.
So that's kind of the whole coping plan. The last thing I do want to make sure that folks put into their plan is, if you're really struggling with suicidal thoughts and you're using your plan isn't really helping, and you're still having very strong urges for suicide, and you're struggling to keep yourself safe, make sure that you also put, in your card, right, in these scenarios where I'm having really strong urges for suicide and I still can't manage my urges even after using my coping plan, I'm going to call 1-800-273-8255, which is the suicide prevention lifeline. And so make sure you have that phone number kind of on your safety plan as well, just in case, because I mean, we can't all memorize the suicide prevention lifeline phone number. It's kind of long. The good thing is that they're now kind of moving into the 988 kind of number, I think. I don't know if that's live yet. But
I
you
don't
can
think it's
also,
live yet, but we're trying. We're trying.
yeah, they're trying. They're really trying. And so for now, just make sure you kind of put down 1-800-273-8255. There might also be local phone numbers, that you know of or that you feel more safe with in your area. So you can also put down that number. But the idea is that you have a professional kind of not network, but a professional line that you can call to get help. Um,
I'm gonna at
and
this point out there is the games and online harassment hotline that is an emergency hotline if you feel like you would love somebody to have that has the context of the gaming space and that kind of geekiness. So please be sure to check them out. Games and online harassment hotline. Unfortunately, they're only open. Hold on, 3 to 7 p.m. Pacific. You text them and then they respond as soon as they reopen. So they're tertiary, secondary source. And then if you're also still thinking about, hey, where should I go? I link all this out on my website. So if you're like later, like, what are you talking about? You can check out Safe in Our World has a listing that have international spaces that are emergency resources. So Safe in Our World and Games and Online Harassment Hotline.
Yeah, and for folks who are, part of the LGBTQ plus community, or kind of, thinking about whether or not, where they fit in that, you can also call the Trevor Project.
Trevor
They
Project,
also
yep.
Yeah, the Trevor Project is a really great lifeline for folks who are kind of questioning and kind of who are part of the LGBTQ plus community.
Awesome, awesome. Yes, we're talking about heart support is a great place. I don't know if your heart support is a great space. I don't know if you're actually suicidal that they're the best resource to go to, but they are a great space to like go and vent and feel accepted and loved. Absolutely. But I think if you're suicidal, they would also say the same thing of go to an actual hotline dedicated to that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And then usually, so this is kind of where actually that project with the mobile crisis numbers came up. But usually at the end, I also add, if you are really feeling unsafe and you're at imminent risk for suicide, like, you're going to do something in the next 24 hours and you're kind of scared that you're going to, act on your suicidal thoughts. In those cases, making sure writing down on your plan, like, in these cases, let's go to the emergency room. I usually, back in the day, I'd always put like call 911, but that's also not the best option now, I realize, for a lot of folks.
Right.
And so you can put down one of those mobile crisis numbers in your area that you might be able to reach out to, or at least have somebody take you to the emergency room. So then at the very least, you can kind of be in a safe place to survive these particularly difficult moments. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. This is amazing. Okay, so reasons for living, warning signs, coping strategies, list of people you can talk to, be specific when you name them, and then, of course, emergency hotline in your country, wherever you're coming from, or if you have availability in your state or one that is more relevant to you. It is a great point when you're making a crisis plan to figure out whatever that is. Like if Trevor Project is going to be your go-to resource, research it now, look into it, and then maybe that's the number you write down as, whatever it might be. Yeah.
Yeah. So, research has shown that even just having this plan can be really helpful when folks are going through a really difficult time emotionally. It can help people feel, more confident in their ability to get through difficult emotional crises. But how you can use your card as well, aside from just knowing it's there and having it lost somewhere in your room. Usually what I would do is I would put this in a place that's going to be really obvious to me when I'm in a bad mood. So for example, like for me, I like to, well, now that I'm in this house, I like to hide in my study when I'm really upset, right? So I'm going to stick this on the back of my door because like if I'm pissed or I'm upset, I'm most likely going to slam my door. And then this is going to be like right in my face. When in those moments. And so you want to put it somewhere that you're going to remember that it's there, or that maybe it's a place that you tend to go to when you're struggling. For some folks, they might slip it into their Bible. For other folks, it might be kind of in their dresser, or like you can also put it on your phone, like take a picture of it. There's also apps for that do something similar. You can have it on your phone if that what makes sense to you. Or, some folks have it on their visor in their car. I don't for folks, I guess, who cope in their car. And so you want to put it somewhere, first of all, that's you can see it because, when we're upset, we're usually in like tunnel vision.
Right.
And so we just want to find the first thing that's going to make us feel better. Yeah. And I want this to be the first thing you find, essentially, when you're looking for that thing that's going to make you feel better. And then once you kind of, you have your plan, what you're going to do is you can read, some of the reasons for living, sure, and, kind of check off the warning signs and be like, okay, yeah, I am in a bad place. But the thing that's really important is looking through your coping strategies. So usually what I try to do is I like to order mine. So then that way, like, it's just easy. It's like a playlist for myself when I'm struggling. And so I'll do karaoke first, then I'm going to take a shower, and then I'm going to curl up in my weighted blanket, right? And then I'm going to add 2 more to this later. And so you'll want to do them from 1 through 5. And then I usually tell people, try to repeat it again from 1 through 5 again. And if you're still not kind of, coming down, repeat it a few times. Which is why I said, like, I take like 3-4 showers sometimes when I'm really struggling.
Right.
And then after you kind of tried your coping strategies and, nothing's working, then you can kind of call the people that you're going to reach out to. And then, if all else doesn't work, right, then you can kind of contact the suicide hotline or emergency services. So that's kind of usually the process that I go through with the coping plan. And usually, by the time I'm going through my coping strategies around the 3rd time, I'm usually down to a place where I'm not feeling better, but at least my brain is in a place where I can think versus just kind of like struggling to like figure out what's going on and freaking out. So that's generally how to use the plan. If you have a partner and you're doing this with them, it's great to just like have it in a place where both of you know where it is. Mm-hmm. So then that way you can help each other out too when you're when things start to get rough.
It's awesome. It's awesome. We've also, I'm going to make a teeny recommendation for peeps in this community. Maybe we'll do this again, but we had created a mental health emergency kit of, we had put together things that you can like open this kit, and it's not that they'll make you feel better, but that will kind of be soothing to see when you're in that space. This is a great thing to put in that kit if you already know you have a kit. And it included things like a hairbrush and lotion and wet wipes and, a coloring page, a notebook, pictures of people you love. So this is a great thing. Maybe make a copy. I don't know, especially if like, I made this, like I could print it right now and make 14 copies of it and put in every corner of my room to, to go back to when things are rough.
Oh yeah. I have one in my living room, so it's like a little bit more discreet because it's in my living room, but I have a bunch of like red and orange and yellow popsicle sticks with different coping skills on each of them,
Oh, I love
depending on how
that.
intense my emotions are. And so like, it's just kind of in this nice little jar in my living room next to my plants. And so if I'm kind of really struggling, depending on how severe I'm feeling, I can kind of pull a red one and be like, okay, karaoke this song, and we're gonna put it on now.
Oh my gosh, I love
But
it.
yeah.
That kind of reminds me, oh my gosh, that kind of reminds me. I used to have a compliments jar. So when I would accomplish something, I had it at my desk at work where I really, really needed it. So I would accomplish something and then I would put it on a piece of paper and I'd put it in this jar. And then eventually you have like a little jar of your little accomplishments. And so when you're not feeling well, one of my coping strategies was to go into the jar, reach out and find like, on X day, I helped an elderly person cross the road or like whatever it might be, and just like reminders of like they're really there to be reminders if the mood I was in was like I've never done anything, I'm useless, I never accomplish anything, I'm so just non sequitur, sorry, but yeah.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's actually a great coping strategy, right? Like if you could put that on your list of coping strategies is to like reach into your like compliments jar, and kind of remind yourself of like, all the great things that you've done. I One of my really weird ones is in my little kind of coping kit thing. I actually have a letter from a patient that I worked with for like 2-3 years, and who was really struggling with suicide at the time. And like reading the letter that he wrote me at the end of our time together really reminds me that like, hey, I'm worthwhile, like I helped someone. And like that's
Yeah,
kind of part of
yeah.
my coping plan, is to like read through these letters that I get from patients.
Yeah, somebody, so this is similar to that. Somebody once told me, actually, I'll say it was Dr. B, who is another wonderful person who's been on the channel quite a few times. And he taught me about a compliment folder. And Bliffle is bringing up point number 2. Later on, when you're trying to put together your resume and you're like, what did I do? All of these go really well to be able to remind you. But yeah, a compliment folder is like anytime anybody's like, hey, you brightened my day. Hey, you did something for me. Hey, I watch your streams because of this. Or my husband told me that I looked really pretty and my eyes pop. Like whatever it is. And so I have this folder and it was really funny. So it's on my OneDrive so that I can access it from anything. So OneDrive is Microsoft's version of like Google Drive, right? And so I have it on my phone. I have it anywhere I have an electronic device, I have OneDrive and I have this folder called compliments. And so I totally forgot, and I let my father-in-law use my OneDrive to upload family videos that he had converted from VHS. And so he asked me, he's like, I didn't go snooping, but like you have a folder of compliments. And so I had to like, it's not weird, I swear. It's not just like a maniacal thing of like me collecting like, yes, everybody loves me. It's like it's helpful, and he was really sweet about it, but it was one of those like really funny moments of like, oh, I forgot I have that there. But yeah, it all ties together.
Yeah. So yeah, that's the safety plan, rainy day plan, coping plan, whatever you want to call it. And yeah, hopefully this is something you can do with people that and or like just make it a regular ritual thing with your family or friends once a year to just kind of go through this.
Thank you so much. I'm so sorry for that quick technical glitch as I switch scenes over back to our regular interview. Do you have just a few more moments to answer a few more questions? Because we
of course.
fell off the face of the earth with the questioning part. Okay, but that was so cool. I'm so grateful for it. And like, I know I've made one of these before, but just doing that with you was very cool. And the community was saying they got to know me in a different way, which is interesting because I really feel like I share everything. But so that's really neat. And thank you for sharing your coping strategies as well, Dr. Law. That means a lot. Thank you for trusting us with that.
Yeah.
So Tardy Microbe asked, what is the first sign of suicide to look for when you suspect someone is suicidal? So we kind of touched upon this, that this really doesn't exist, but is there any way we can answer this question?
Yeah, if there's one thing, being so scientifically, I think of it as like over arousal. But these are like signs of like somebody being just like really agitated. Maybe they're not sleeping. and stuff like that. So over arousal is one that I would look for, because we do see that pretty consistently in people who are about to make a suicide attempt, is that they'll be really agitated, they're not sleeping, they're, they're just kind of like up all the time. Another thing is like, if somebody's going through a really rough time, and they've been struggling for a really long time, and all of a sudden, just like that, things seem to be getting better and they're like happy again and all that whatnot. That's
Yes.
actually a important sign to look out for. And the way I explain it is that it's kind of like, if you're in a really crappy job and you're like miserable the whole time at the job, and then you put in your resignation letter and now there's an end date, you're gonna go to job every day smiling because there's an end date.
Yep.
And so very similar thing tends to happen for folks who have been struggling for a long time. They've been planning their suicide, and now they have a date, or like like not a designated time, but like they know when
They
they're
have
going
the
to do it.
plan. They have a
They have the
concrete
plan.
plan. Yeah.
Exactly. Then they're kind of like, oh, okay, well, I guess I'm going to enjoy the rest of this time, before I go. And so that's another one I would look out for. So over arousal, sudden change in affect. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay. I don't know why it's not loading, but I considered studying medicine when I was a kid, says Taito Magatsu, but decided not to, among other things, because of the burden of responsibility of other people's lives and well-being. How do you deal with that burden? And thank you for doing so, however you're able to do it.
Yeah. So for me, I'm actually religious. I'm Catholic. And so for me, a really big part of it is just prayer. I like to just think of it as like letting go and letting God take care of it. So oftentimes, I really try to validate like, hey, I did my best here. I did everything that I can. I did the safety plan. I followed through with everything that I was supposed to do. At this point, it's out of my hands, and just kind of recognizing that it's no longer in my control has been a really big thing for me. I also have a very wonderful partner who understands like my work is really heavy, and so he likes to make sure that I have fun as well. So when I get stuck on doing something and I'm like kind of really dredged down by it, he'll make sure we do something fun, watch a funny movie, or like he does something to lighten the mood a little bit. And so that's also been really helpful for me. And then also just kind of remembering why I'm doing this, like similar to a lot of folks who are passionate about suicide prevention, like it's really touched our lives in one way or another. And so remembering like, who am I doing this for? Why am I doing this? Really kind of just keeps me going. And sometimes, like I have to remind myself, like if you're going to make this difference for this community,
No, 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 no. Am I still here?
take a
Hello?
break and take
Oh,
a
okay. You're
breather.
back. Okay. Sorry.
Oh,
It said my
oh,
internet is unstable. I'm sorry, everybody. I'm sorry.
no, no, yes.
Okay. In that same vein, I have to ask, is it healthy that like I have separated probably should be just asking my therapist, but so like people have come into stream before and they've said I'm suicidal, and the way that I have coped with that is I have said to myself, and I don't know if it's because I've experienced it myself, but the way I cope with it is that I just set it aside as like, this is not my weight to carry. This is how somebody else is feeling. Like there are definitely times where it's triggered me to have experienced my own feelings, but overall I am able to kind of say like, this is not how I'm feeling. This is how this person is feeling, and I want to do my best to help them, but my best is all I can do. And for some reason, I don't know, like I'm able to do that. Is that bad? Is
Yeah.
that weird?
I mean, I don't think it's like, I don't think you'd say it's healthy or unhealthy, right? Like you think of it as like helpful and not helpful, right? Like if it's helpful for you to just kind of have those emotional boundaries for yourself, then that's great. Like, yeah, like, yeah, if it's not harmful or anything like that, I feel like it helps. Like for me, when I'm dealing with it, I immediately shut off my personal kind of self too, and I'm dive into my clinician kind of persona, put on my clinician hat. And sometimes my friends are like, okay, I need Keyne here. So they all know
Yeah.
when it's time, like if I'm getting too like clinical or like too researchy, my
Right.
friends would be like, great, and I kind of need you to be
I
my
just need you
friend
to be
right
my
now. And
friend.
I'll like,
Right.
yeah, I'll snap out of it. Um, But yeah, so like I think for me, I tend to compartmentalize a little bit, especially because it is a rough topic for me, because of all the personal touches I've had with
Right,
it.
right.
I do need to like give myself some space by like stepping out of my kind of usual persona.
Hmm. Okay. All right. I wonder, you know what? That's a great question I think to ask my friends is if they're if I have an anxiety persona. I but here's the thing, I make a very strict like distinction that I am not even qualified to be a therapist in any shape or form. So like if anybody comes to me, like I always give that disclaimer, but I also, and I think that's bothered my friends more because I have like friends have come to me just for advice, and I've been like, I'm not a therapist, and they're like, yeah, I freaking know, I know, you say it every time, and I know, I just need you to listen to me. You don't have to be a therapist, but that's my own thing. Okay, two more questions, just two more. Okay, so when you ask and find a friend or family member who is going to attempt or is in the suicidal space, what is the next step for help for them? Asks Zephyriah Black.
Yeah. So if they have a plan, the thing is you'll want to start thinking about like how do we keep them safe, right? So something that we do a lot is called mean safety. And so you'll want to make sure that like if they have a gun, right? Like is the gun and the ammo stored separately? Do they have a gun lock? Can you hold on to their gun for them? And just kind of making sure they don't have access to the means that they're going to use to die by suicide. And so oftentimes people think like, well, if I take away this one means, they're just going to use this other thing. But a lot of research has suggested that like people don't switch means like that. It takes them a while to build up the capability to think about suicide using a certain type of means. And so kind of keeping them safe by like removing those means can be really helpful. Um, Another thing is, doing a safety plan with them, right? Like kind of going through this process that we just did can also be really helpful. And you staying with them, if you can kind of let them stay with you and just hang out with them, and being there for them while they're kind of trying to survive this moment, that can also be really helpful. But the thing is like, if you're like, please promise me that you're going to, I don't know, give your partner your gun and whatnot, like, and you want to make sure that you can confirm and follow up on that to make sure that they actually did it, in order to actually keep them safe. Sorry, like my brain's like starting to scatter a
Yeah, no,
little
no, no.
bit.
We've been going for a while,
But
so
yeah,
it's a lot. It's a lot. We're almost done though. Thank
yeah, but
you.
so kind of to tie that all together nicely, things that I would do would be to help them put together a safety plan, try to remove any means that they are planning to use to die by suicide, and just kind of keep those out of the way, I guess. And then being warm, being there, just listening. I think oftentimes, we like to give our own opinions about like whether or not somebody should die by suicide, how much they have to live for. Like what you think about their situation does not matter at that moment. All that matters is that you're there, you're listening and validating that how much pain they're in, and kind of what they're going through, and just listening empathetically. Um, you know, yeah, and listening empathetically to kind of what they're going through. And so that always like slips my mind to talk about because I just assume that it's something we do the whole time.
Right, but
While we're kind of
it's
helping
not.
people,
It's
but it's
not.
not. Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah,
yeah. People have a
unfortunately.
lot of judgments and opinions about it, and so just kind of yeah, focus on what they're feeling and validating what they're feeling, and then trying to get them to safety is the next thing to do, I suppose. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That's super helpful. So this last question from Nanosphere isn't exactly a question, but I'm going to make it one, as I have done that before. I hope Nano forgives me. But when my friend felt suicidal, they told me that when they were trying to think of something positive in that time, that actually made them feel increased sadness. Is that common? So I kind of want to elaborate on that. The biggest fight my sister and I ever had, and her and I have she basically raised me, so her and I have a very close relationship. But the biggest fight we ever had was she sent me a TED Talk on positive psychology when I told her that I was depressed. And I responded to her and I was like, you think what I need right now is somebody telling me that I just need to be more positive? Like, I don't understand how to experience that emotion. You telling me that I just need to be more positive is not it. And so that was a huge fight we had, and you kind of touched upon that in your previous comment about the fact that like people feel like they need to give their opinion or simplify what you're feeling or downplay
toxic and positive.
Yep. So what do we do instead? Because telling them like, go look at the sunset is not, it's not gonna be it.
Yeah, which is why you really kind of have to let them generate their own reasons for living, right? Like you don't want to tell them what they have to live for. And yeah, it is a really big struggle in those moments. And so it can be like the smallest thing. And the thing is like if you're kind of in this moment with your loved one, right? Like they've survived for a very long time having suicidal thoughts, probably. Like this is not day one of them having suicidal thoughts. So what's kept them going up until now? What's prevented them from doing it up until like this point? And that might be a great way to kind of come about this question instead of being like, well, what are some great things to live for right now? Which is just can be really disingenuous and like feels like very like toxic, positive kind of realm. And so I might come about it like, okay, so like what's keeping you going? Like why haven't you killed yourself yet? Like what's keeping you here? And frame that question in that way. So then that way they can think about it from that perspective versus from the perspective of, you know, I need to find something good about life, which is a big struggle right now. Yeah.
Right. Okay, so I did say last question and I corrected my community because they were like, we have one more question. And I'm sorry, I have to ask you this question because we ask every guest and it's very important. It's very important to this community. I should probably start telling people as I set them up for interviews, like you will be asked this, and I guess think about it in advance, and I'm sorry. But what do you believe, how do you personally define the word bumfuzzle? I'm so sorry.
My mind is not going to a great place right now. I don't know if people really want to know what's coming to mind.
I said it's the fuzz on somebody. It's okay. So here's what I said. I said it is like the fuzz on somebody's butt. It's like an opinion that doesn't matter. Like, okay, well, you're spewing some.
I'm glad that I'm not the only one.
Yeah, that's exactly. I was like, you're spewing some bumfuzzle. Like it's just like it's like butt fuzz. Like it's not needed. You know, like
yeah. I think you know mine went a little bit dirtier in that I was thinking like penis was and not like the full butt, but full butt sounds a lot better than where my mind is going. So I'm gonna keep with that.
I'm sorry, I gave you an answer. I was supposed to stay impartial. I can't. Oh man.
So you kind of guessed what I was going to say.
There you go. Perfect. All right. Done. It's really interesting. We love watching how people like solve this issue. And your face, I'm so sorry. Your face was perfect because you were like, I saw in it reflected to me was like, I am a serious researcher. I'm talking about suicide and you're asking me about bumfuzzle. What am I doing? I have to warn people that this is incoming now. Yeah.
You know, I'm kind of used to it because this is the kind of stuff my partner does to get me out of my head a lot. So he'll like spew a really random fact about, I don't know, flamingos or something. Yeah. Just out of nowhere. Because like, I have this like serious, like, I'm like doing all the things kind of mode. And he's like, no, you need to laugh.
He's like, here's how flamingos poop. And you're like, I mean, now I know. Yeah, it takes I do the same. I know. And my partner will do the same thing where like, it takes a second and you're like, I didn't need this information. Wait a minute. Okay, I'm thinking about it.
Yeah. I recently saw, okay, this is like completely tangential and I feel like my filter is slowly like.
Oh, yeah. It's too late for a filter.
But like, it reminds me of this TikTok that I saw the other day about like how your anus can stretch until 7 inches before it breaks. And a raccoon is about 4 inches.
Oh no.
So you can hold 2 raccoons.
Oh no. All right, fam. So next time you are thinking about something serious, just remember these facts about raccoons and or anuses. I actually don't know what it's more a fact about, but I guess anuses. So anusi. Anyway, thank you, Dr. Keyne. I love you. Like, I loved you before and I didn't know you, but I like love you now. So thank you. Thank you so, so much for being here. I appreciate the heck out of you. I'm so, 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 so grateful to have had you. Can you like plug your, I feel like I didn't press this button that would let people know about all of your links. So can you please plug yourself away before we finish? Like, where can people find you? Where should they find you? All that stuff.
Yeah, so I am currently at Seattle Pacific University in Seattle. So you can always go to my faculty profile, which then links you to my lab's website. So you can see the research that my team is doing. And if you want to participate in some of our studies, we have links to all of our studies as well in our website. So I think it's www.crisislab seattle.com.
We'll have it in the post and in YouTube, so it's all good. Okay.
And hey, if you are ever interested in, doing suicide research and pursuing a career in clinical psychology, I am taking graduate students, and so you can always kind of, keep an eye out if the work that I'm doing is interesting to you, and you're like, hey, you know what, I want to pursue a PhD. And if you don't, even if you don't know how to get started, please feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to nerd out about that. And I did make a pamphlet in 7th grade after all. I might not send you the pamphlet because this was internet was a thing. We were still using
probably has some Microsoft clip art in it. It's just not up to date.
Yeah. It was Microsoft word art. I thought that was the coolest thing in 7th grade. So I can kind of, if you want to figure out how to kind of get to where I am in my career, please feel free to reach out. I'm more than happy to chat through hey, what can you do to become a clinical psychologist? What do you need? How do you prepare yourself to apply for grad school and stuff like that? So I'm also happy to answer questions about that. And my email is all in my faculty profile and in my website. So you can reach out to me through there.
Thank you so much for being here, Dr. Keyne. I'm so stoked to have the crisis plan. I'm actually going to post it. I think I'm going to post it to Twitter later so people kind of get an idea of what it is. And I'm so grateful for you. Thank you, everybody who's here. We are going to be right back. Thank you so much, Dr. Law.
Yeah, thank you for having me and inviting me to do this. This was super fun.
Oh, yay! All right, we'll be right back, fam.
All right, bye.